Chapter 2 of The Heir of Slaves, an Autobiography, by William Pickens. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by James K. White. To Arkansas. At last, an agent representing a planter in the Mississippi River Valley of Arkansas induced my father to sign a contract to move his entire family to that state. In order to appreciate the persuasions which the agent used, the ignorance and superstition of such families would have to be understood. Ignorant people are too quick to believe tales of other places and other times. Our family had 100 signs, mostly signs of evil. By the ruddy glow of the fire at nights, the children were told of ghosts, of strange cats, dogs, voices, and sounds, of the no-headed man, of graveyards, and the weird history of the ill-famed 3-Mile Bottom near the village. The Federal soldiers were described not as common men, but as beings from a superworld. And with the irony of truth, Lincoln was pictured as more than mortal. To such a group, reports from the outside world come with a feeling of otherworldliness. The agent said that Arkansas was a tropical country of soft and balmy air, where coconuts, oranges, lemons, and bananas grew. Ordinary things like corn and cotton, with little cultivation, grew an enormous yield. On the 15th of January, 1888, the agent made all the arrangements, purchased tickets, and we boarded the train in Seneca, South Carolina, bound toward Atlanta, Georgia. Our route lay through Birmingham and Memphis, and at each change of trains there seemed to be some representative of the scheme to see us properly forwarded, like so much freight, billed for we know not where. It was midwinter, but with all the unquestioning faith and good cheer of our race, we expected to land at the other end of our journey in bright sunshine and spring weather. And a comical-looking lot we must have been. We had no traveling cases, but each one bore some curious burden, sacks of clothes, quilts, bags, bundles, and baskets. When we left our home, the weather was comparatively mild, but as fate would have it, the nearer we got to Arkansas, the colder it became. In Memphis, the snow was deep and the wind biting. The faith and enthusiasm of the party grew less. Perhaps the older heads were waking up to a suspicion. The further we got from our South Carolina home, the dearer it seemed, as is true of most things in their first abandonment. When we reached a small station in Arkansas, like freight, again we were met by 2 double-team wagons of the unknown planter to whom we were consigned. We were hauled away many miles through cypress brakes and snow and ice sufficiently thick to support the teams. The older people, I suppose, had by this time comprehended the situation, but we children were constantly peering out from under our quilts and coverings, trying to discover a coconut or an orange blossom, while the drivers swore at the mules for slipping on the solid ice. Perhaps nothing could equal this disappointment, unless it be the chagrin of those ignorant Negroes who have been induced to go to Africa under the persuasion that bread trees grew there, right on the brink of molasses ponds, and wild hogs with knives and forks sticking in their backs trotted around ready-baked. When we reached the estate of our consignee, still like freight, we were stored away. Bags, bundles, boxes, and all of us in a one-room hut to await the breaking of winter and the beginning of field work. What could we do? The planter had the contract binding us hard and fast. Just what we owed for transportation, no one knew. Besides, we had been furnished with salt meat, meal, and molasses for the first weeks of enforced idleness, and we were supplied with a little better food, including sugar, coffee, and flour, when field work began. As in the case of any property on which one has a lease, our lessor could lay out more on our maintenance in the seasons when we were bringing returns. When the first year's settlement came around and 100 bales of cotton had been produced by the family and sold by the planter, Father came home with sad, faraway eyes, having been told that we were deeper in debt than on the day of our arrival. And who could deny it? The white man did all the reckoning. The Negro did all the work. The Negro can be robbed of everything but his humor. And in the bottomlands of Arkansas, he has made a rhyme. He says that on settlement day, the landowner sits down, takes up his pen, and reckons thus: a naught's a naught, and a figure's a figure. All for the white man, none for the nigger. But we were not long depressed. To keep down debts in the ensuing winter, Mother cooked and washed, and Father felled trees in the icy breaks to make rails and boards. No provisions were drawn from the planter. The old debt remained, of course, and perhaps took advantage of this quiet period to grow usuriously. This lowland is malarial, chills and fevers returning like the seasons. Our medicine and physician, too, had to be secured on the feudal plan, the planter paying the bills. Under such a system, the physician has the greatest possible temptation to neglect the patient. His pay is sure, and there is no competition. The spring sickness was miserable. We had come from an elevated, healthy country, and our constitutions fell easy prey to the germs of the lowlands. For the first year, the children were kept out of school in hope of getting rid of the debt. Very small children can be used to hoe and pick cotton, and I have seen my older sisters drive a plow. The next year, we attended the short midsummer and midwinter sessions of the plantation school. The school was dominated by the interests of the planter. When the children were needed in the fields, he simply commanded the school to close. It was an old-fashioned district school, where the spelling classes stood in line with recognized head and foot. Your ability to spell was denoted by your position in the line relative to the head and the foot. When your neighbor toward the head missed a word and you spelled it, you turned him down, with all others who had missed that word in succession. That is, you took your position above them. If you were absent from a class, when you returned, whatever had been your position in the line, you had to go foot. I had a sister a year or so older than I, who stood head about all the time, while I stood second. And we used to stay home a day for the exquisite pleasure of going foot and turning the whole class down. This sister had a phenomenal memory when a child. The second year, the whole family plunged into work and made a bigger and better crop. But at reckoning time, history repeated itself. There was still enough debt to continue the slavery. If the debt could not be paid in fat years, there was the constant danger that lean years would come and make it bigger. But there was the contract and the law would not hunt the equity, but would enforce the letter of the contract. It was understood that the Negro was unreliable, and the courts must help the poor planters. There was but one recourse, the way of escape. The attempt must be executed with success, or there might be fine and peonage. On some pretext, my father excused himself and went to Little Rock. A few miles out of that city, he found a landowner who would advance the fares for the family and rent to us a small farm. This looks at first sight like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. But a rented farm with a definite loan is a different proposition from a state of debt slavery, where the creditor sells all the produce and does all the counting. Moreover, when a condition is about as bad as it can be, there is a tendency in human nature to move on to another bad condition with a sort of desperate venture. Human nature will flee from a known condition that is very bad to an unknown condition that might be worse, in spite of Lord Hamlet's soliloquy. And so one night the young children and some goods were piled into a wagon, and the adults went afoot. By morning we were in the town of Augusta, 12 or 15 miles away, where we caught the first train. I have one very pleasant recollection of the place from which we had escaped. An aged Negro, a characteristic Uncle Remus, would come some nights and relate to us quaint animal stories. The antics and cleverness of Brer Rabbit, Brer Bar, Brer Fox, Sis Cow, and Brer Tommy Mud Turtle did much to enliven the dullness of the hours. End of chapter 2. Read by James K. White, Chula Vista.